Now, Liam Lawson has had a glorious sixth race in his career, which came after a long break in 2023 as he scored 2 points while his teammate finished outside of the top 10. What made this finish an even greater achievement is the fact that he was able to finish ahead of Tsunoda and 2 places behind Perez while starting dead last at P19, as only Russell was behind him starting from the pit lane. Now that Lawson has proven that he has what it takes to be a contender, is this the sign for Red Bull to bring him alongside Verstappen for 2025? Will this open up a space for yet another strongly performing driver in Colapinto? It goes without saying that Lawson's debut was exactly what he needed after a 60-place grid penalty in Austin, finishing P9 and scoring 2 points, with only Hamilton likely to have finished ahead of him if he was to finish the race in the first place. The Kiwi driver came under a lot of pressure this weekend because this is just one of the 6 chances he'll have to prove that he's worthy of an F1 seat. And not only that, but the fact that Red Bull is keeping a close eye on him also plays a huge role in this entire situation. When talking about the performance of Lawson, Horner was full of praise as he went on to say, "I think if you're getting into a spat and getting your elbows out with Fernando on your first race back in, you're doing alright. I think he drove an exceptional race today from 19th to 9th. He was fast, he was courageous, and I thought it was an excellent comeback for him. I thought he jumped in and looked like a veteran. He did great, and he can be very happy with that drive. I thought he drove a great Grand Prix, starting 19th, finishing in the points, some great overtakes, so he should be pleased with that." Lawson, on the other hand, was adamant that while he definitely didn't expect to score points today, the alternative strategy that he was put on has seemingly worked wonders for his race, as the degradation wasn't as high as anticipated, meaning that he could have gone on very long on the hard tyre and then mount fresh medium tyres in order to get past the grid easily. The opposite was done with Tsunoda, who was quite angry that the strategy didn't work out in his favour, and from battling with Perez for a position to ultimately finishing outside of the points, the Japanese driver will have a huge challenge to deal with in the last 5 events of the season. Even the current team principal of Racing Bulls, Lauren Mekis, was full of praise for Lawson, as he said that the youngster raced exceptionally well, considering that he hasn't participated in a race since October last year. The hype around Lawson was always going to be this big, and this is not something that should surprise us. But now the pressure is on Perez's shoulders, as Red Bull are just 8 points ahead of Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship, meaning that they will need a lot of help from the second driver next to Verstappen if they want to see things change sooner rather than later. This was recognised by Helmut Marko as well, who went on to talk about the possibility of Lawson replacing Perez from 2025 onwards, as he's the man who brought the Kiwi driver to where he is right now. Elaborating on this matter to a greater extent, Marko said, "A really great debut for Lawson. This was already apparent in Q1, where he drove the 3rd fastest time. He was in control at all times and had great overtaking maneuvers. You have to put the youngsters in the car and then it works. Lawson is definitely a man for the future." But Lawson would definitely find it very hard to fight with Tsunoda, because one race doesn't mean he's automatically better than Tsunoda. Even though it was a continuation from the last year's 5-race streak that he anticipated, 3 of which have gone to his advantage, because we don't count the other 2 in which Tsunoda did not finish or start the race. And this is something that's been further fueled by Honda, as the Japanese manufacturer were adamant that they have one goal in mind: give Tsunoda an opportunity to fight for a Red Bull seat, because he's shown time after time that he can be the driver that the Austrian team needs. Although, truth be told, Austin has shown exactly why he hasn't been considered as the legitimate successor of Perez. The spin in turn 1 that cost him a couple of places, as well as the outburst on the radio when he saw that the tactics of him and Lawson were different, is not something that Red Bull will want to deal with. Nevertheless, Honda is pushing for this scenario to happen, and when talking about it to a greater extent, Koji Watanabe, the sporting director of Honda, said, "Regarding Tsunoda, our goal is for him to work hard and secure a seat at Red Bull Racing. We believe he has the talent. Of course, driver decisions are ultimately up to the team, but as a partner, we've strongly requested that Tsunoda needs to be given the chance to drive and test in a Red Bull car. We want to at least give him the opportunity to showcase his ability. I've also spoken directly with Christian about this. He hasn't ruled it out. Nothing has been decided yet, but I think we need to proceed properly." Now, before Austin, you would have normally thought that Yuki is the logical replacement for Perez because the team doesn't really have too much to choose from now that Ricciardo has been expelled from the team. But Lawson's P9 finish changed everything. What's even more important to note is that he won't always have penalties that would put him to the back of the grid. And if we were to judge from his Q1 session, we could have easily thought that he would go to Q3 and provide even greater amount of points in the V-Carb's fight for P6 with Haas in the Constructors' Championship. That, however, might not even be the final goal for Lawson, because now it's more than adamant that Perez's seat is under threat for 2025, and there are very two important candidates we need to look into, Lawson and Tsunoda. If Lawson is the one who gets promoted, then it opens up the chance for Colapinto to move to Racing Bulls, as he's also been brilliant in Austin, scoring a point and outperforming his teammate Albon for the second weekend in a row. When talking about Perez's pressure in Red Bull and how he needs to up his game if he wants to remain their driver in the foreseeable future, Marco said, "Perez announcing his retirement in Mexico is a rumor. He himself says there is no truth in it. Let's see. But nevertheless, he has to improve his performance." And again, what this does is opens the door for Franco Colapinto, who is now in a very difficult situation even though he scored 5 points in his F1 career that started just a couple of races ago. This is something that Williams have been dreaming of with Sargent, and while it's too late for Colapinto to be considered for the seat in the Grove-based squad, James Vowles said that he's willing to land him to a team that's willing to accept his services, despite the risk that he'll be taking points away from his team as a result. Now, Sauber are looking more and more likely to choose a young driver, but with the latest rumours that they've restarted talks with Mick Schumacher, the only chance for Colapinto could be Racing Bulls, as Helmut Marko has been full of praise for the young Argentinian driver. Even if Tsunoda is the driver who gets promoted to Red Bull, it still leaves an open seat for Colapinto to be moved to, and when talking about it, James Vowles said, "Colapinto being on the grid next year is definitely not out of the question. It's more down to one or two other teams, not giving away too much, but from my perspective, he absolutely has earned his place on the grid within a few races. He hasn't finished growing. He's going to get quicker and quicker, and I think other teams know that on the grid. So even if he's taking points away from us, he's a professional racing driver and should be racing in Formula 1. Obviously, a lot would have to happen for Colapinto to receive a seat for 2025, and even Lawson is adamant that the hopes for him to get into Red Bull during the next campaign are close to zero. But that doesn't mean they should just give up on their hopes. Yes, Perez is holding up the entire market because the sponsorship money he's bringing is looking like the major factor that the Austrian team is now holding so tight to his services, even though he's the only driver from the top 8 to never have won a race and costing them so much in the Constructors' Championship. Well, with all this in mind, where do you think Colapinto and Lawson would end up in 2025? And more importantly, do you think that there is a situation in which Lawson and Verstappen could be teammates in Red Bull from next year? Which would give Racing Bulls a lot to think about when it comes to the services of Colapinto. Let us know in the comments down below.